the 1920s, amps were invented for public address and movie theater use, but they relied on heavy batteries and were not portable. They were also radio horns of limited frequency range and low acoustic output. The cone speaker that we use today wasn't available until 1925. For the next 10 years or so, people used these amps to amplify acoustic guitars. However, the guitar amp first became widely popular in the 30s and 40s due to the craze for Hawaiian lap steel music. After 1927, smaller portable AC-powered PA systems could be plugged into a regular wall socket and quickly became popular with musicians. The first true combo amp, specifically sold for guitar, was the 1928 Stromberg Voisinette, which people hated. Musicians found that the amps had unsatisfactory tone and volume and dependability problems, so the product did not sell well. But it still launched a new idea: a portable electric instrument amp with a speaker all packaged in an easily transportable wooden cabinet. As the next decade rolls by, many incremental improvements come about via leapfroggers, or subsequent products, which build upon a previous product by adding small and incremental innovations. That's an entrepreneurial term that I'll be using a lot in this series, so you better get used to it. You could think of leapfroggers as copycats, who either do something better or different. They add a new benefit, a new feature, a better design, a better production process, better marketing, anything that makes the product sell. Every time a radical, disruptive innovation is introduced, we see a train of leapfroggers reacting to each other in a back-and-forth game of differentiation. The original, disruptively innovative product quite literally creates an industry out of thin air, and as the industry grows, it becomes more saturated, forcing companies to define a bigger, better, and more particular USP, or unique selling proposition. That's a fancy way of saying product differentiator, which is a fancy way of describing the particular something that makes a product unique, different, and/or superior. We'll come back to leapfrogging when we get into the effects pedal boom. But overall, just be sure to pay attention to how any new product builds upon the previous and adds some sort of additional product differentiation. Maybe the product is the exact same, just looks different or branded differently, both of which are still valid product differentiators. So 1921, Vega launched a banjo amp that people didn't hate, but for guitarists, in 1932, Electro introduced a high output amp that set the standard template for combo amps. It also added a convenient carrying handle for transport. 2 years later, in 1934, Rickenbacker launched a similar amp that added metal corner protectors to keep the corners in good condition during transport. In 1933, Dobro released an amp with 2 speakers built in and 5 tubes. Also in 1933, LA-based Volutone tried to use a high voltage current to sense string vibration, but this was pretty dangerous and never really became popular. The guitar amp combos of the late 20s and 30s only had a single volume control and no tone control, or an off switch. To turn it on, you just plugged it in. In 1934, Gibson had developed prototype combo amps but never released them. By 1934, Electro Rickenbacker had sold more amps and electric guitars than all of the amps and electric guitars that had been made from 1928 through the end of 1934. Was picking up. In 1934, Dobro released a guitar amp with a vacuum tube rectifier and 2 power tubes, which regulated voltage, and therefore volume and sound. In 1935, Dobro and National began selling combo amps for Hawaiian guitar. Amps were starting to get better and better, but they were still seeking the cleanest, loudest tone possible. But the basics were there. You plug an electrified guitar into an amplifier circuit, then into a cone speaker. That cone speaker produced all of the sounds heard at live concerts. Nobody would mic the amps and feed them into a PA for decades to come. If you wanted to be heard as a guitarist, you needed a big amp, or turn a small amp up as loud as it will go, accidentally producing distortion in the process. More on this later. Now that we understand the 2 most essential pieces of gear, the electrified guitar and the amplifier, now we can properly confront the next wave of innovations: effects. By this point, amps started to have a primitive tone control, mainly providing treble adjustment so you didn't slice your ears off. Cue the age of tone.
Don't you know a hard time